Wow, and we are live. Oh my
Hey.
God. Do you know what, Aaron? I'm feeling a little bit starstruck and I don't know why. I remember the first time we spoke, and you have the same effect on me every single time. And I'm beginning to work out what it is that is happening for me. It's just you're very present. Like you're very alive. I'm quite an alive person too, so I understand the snap, crackle, and pop. But you're really here. Like you're really here. I love that. I love that. So you're in Berlin. Do you have you in your own studio? You're in a shared space. What's it like?
Oh yeah, I have my photo studio, I have my art studio, the different spaces for the different ideas. It's you know, it's a moving and shaking topic, everything's moving and where the art is, but that's what makes it beautiful, you know?
Yeah. And do you have to travel from one to the other? So are you incorporating the city in that distance?
Yeah, yeah. And it's also, I'm finding this intersection between where I make the different types of work, where do I make, when I'm sitting down in the morning and working in my sketchbook, that's like, oh, it's in my own space. How do we create art in our own space versus creating it maybe in our own space and another place where we're like, oh, I'm going to this space to create.
Yeah, yeah. And is that ritualistic? You getting up, you're having your coffee. Can you just talk me through this now? I want to go there.
Yeah, I think part for me is the that it's a moving process, that it's
Mhm.
not necessarily like, oh, this is the static system. This is the how does it integrate with today? That I'm getting up, I'm making the coffee, well, I'm making the espresso, and then I have my milk frother going, and then, maybe making myself a sandwich or something, and that comes with like, oh, I'm making some art, and maybe
Yeah.
I'm, yeah, maybe it's quiet, maybe there's a YouTube on, maybe I grab a little call from a friend, I'm in my sketchbook. Sometimes it's like a quiet day, sometimes it's a moving day. I like
Mm.
that element of letting it flow, of allowing the systems to build and change over time.
Mm. You're letting it flow, but you're understanding like the entanglement of it, aren't you? But in a poetic way. So it's like Aaron's having some quantum entanglement with his froth, his coffee, his notepad, his world. It's almost like, and that, it's so meta, isn't it? I just know this about you. When I'm following you online, I feel like I'm the observer too. It's like you've made everyone the self as you're going around this poetic life. And have you always thought like that in kind of symbolism and nuance and kind of like the tiny little details and the mystery? I don't want to lead you into this, but I want you to kind of put it into some kind of delicious meal for me because I know that's how you're portraying it.
I think for myself, it's always been there, and then there have been some experiences that have helped me grow and shape that in different degrees. I know, like the time that I was in India for some months and writing and working there, that definitely shifted my understanding of myself and myself as an artist, what it
Mm,
was to create ritualistically, and
mm,
allowing that to grow and develop, allowing the part of my background is in design, and I think about these systems as growing design, as how do we go into it, allow these experiences to flow through us into our art, and establish what it is that the lived experience goes into the creation. That, for instance, right now I'm also back on my interview series, and then it's like, oh, my experiences with these different people, different artists and creatives flows into my work, into my questions, into my art making process, that they're each entangled within each other. And yeah, certain experiences in my life has then shaped my ability to see the world in such a way, that the experience shapes that. And you mentioned something else about like this first person view into the art. I really like that. This concept, especially within, I don't know, my photography, and then I've explored it through this digital landscape, is how do I allow the world, or even just one other person to see the world through my lens, through my observation.
Mm.
And I think that's actually part of my own inner struggle, is this back and forth between the observer and the lived experience.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think that's why I find it so delicious and delightful because I understand my intuition, my inner being is resonating with what you're doing. And I think, and it's really interesting you said that you spent time in India, only because obviously I lived there for 4 years. So immediately I parachuted in there and can see how everything is going on there. So one is almost, you're like a time traveler. You're kind of going through so many sequences of events simultaneously that you do start to feel that you're, almost astral traveling your way through India at times, sometimes as a like to as a mechanism of slight disassociation because it's intense, and then sometimes because the richness pulls you in and it's so romanticized and like along with awakenings as well. But what I also really appreciate about what you're trying to do is this symbolism. Here's my theory. We've got a lot of information happening at the moment, and seem to have been devalued somewhat, so, this kind of, you're talking about that, you're having that kind of interplay where you are the observer and then you're the full experience and then you're back being the observer. What are your thoughts on how the world is going? Because I know, like me, you love mixed media, you love the digital world because it's all part of the experience and it's just another kind of meta moment. But what are your thoughts on this kind of moving less from words and more into like, take a look, have the experience?
I find it very interesting, the elements of where words play into the work or play into our experiences of life, because it's almost like coming back to from the visuals into the words, or flowing from one medium into the other, and being so perhaps enthralled by video where you have these layers of words interlaced, and then to, I think, not only come back into the experience but come back into our own imaginations to see
Mm,
again, from within ourselves. When do
mm,
we find this? I'm seeing things in the external world, and to say, I'm now seeing things again in through my inner lens.
mm,
And I find the words can play through that? How do we walk through our external experiences? How do we allow a song to take us on a journey?
Mm.
How do we allow, and words are just are just these elements. And I find it also very interesting living in different cultures is to experience life perhaps without the words,
Mm.
is that there's the give and take, that there's to live without different elements that might make us blind to certain things, but also bring out other senses from within us. And I think you might be discussing a little bit of this element.
Yeah, I think I am. And I think I'm saying through your work, this permission slip for, you know, just to say it that way, of it's open to interpretation
Yeah,
and then open to interpretation. It's
yeah.
so Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah, I find such an interesting balance, and I go through this with my work. I think is that it's how much do we allow for that interpretation, and also learning to be, the balance of this is concrete,
Hmm,
this is what I want you to see, this is the
hmm,
complete interpretation and the abstract story within story and metaphor within metaphor.
yeah.
And I like that it's almost the created and disappeared. It's the imagined and let go. What it was really is a metaphor and a metaphor in my life and somebody else's life, and then what is what are those things that we hold on that are concrete, and what is our own interpretation. And I find that, that's an ongoing, I think, discussion within my work, within my different bodies of work.
Mm, yeah, because I should imagine that with when you're painting or drawing, that's scope is, through the imagination. And then when it's photography, like you say, it's creating a safe space, creating a space that is worthy of who's in front of you, how, through what their what your mutual understanding is of what's about to take place. Can you talk a little bit about what you've noticed as an artist that's different from one to the other, just so that people can understand that?
Yeah, I think part of it is, as I was discussing earlier about these systems and these, as experiencing different systems of play, it's that
Mm,
it's like, oh, if I have this element, then I can go in from this perspective. So when I approach it from, you know, drawing or painting first, or, a different medium, and the medium is the massage, is it, or it's the it's this way in is through the medium. And I like that it can have these different interpretations as I enter, and I think that allows also the viewer to explore these interpretations through various ways. Um, as far as the difference, I it's changing as I develop my work. I think within different series, I have different approaches, and I like, and that it's an iterative process for me. That it's okay. Now I'm taking my art from this perspective and exploring it with acrylics, and now I'm saying, okay, now there are acrylic pens and watercolors, and is it going, and I ask myself, this is like, oh, is it going along with this body of work that I've, and finding this line work, and the line discovers the face and the faces
Mm,
of the people that I see in the world in this observed place. Because for instance, I'm taking some of this line work and I'm going out to bars and clubs in the city and painting and drawing, and some of them that don't allow photography, I'm painting and drawing, and some that do allow it. And it's like, okay, tonight's a night for the camera.
mm,
Uh, and then I ask myself, is it a place for observation? Is it something that I want to interpret?
mm.
Is it something that I'm placing upon the subject or I'm pulling away from? Um, and then perhaps with a pen, I ask myself, what is the observation? I've started to, for instance, host some figure drawing spaces here in Berlin. And,
What's a
you know,
figure drawing?
so having a
Oh, okay.
model nude, and then drawing and hosting a space for others to draw and interpret. And I did this for years, quite some years ago. But hours and hours and hours, I used to be with this figure drawing, and slowly, I think just getting into, okay, here's the subject, here's how I'm relating to it, and
Mm,
then it develops. I
mm,
think that for me is the interesting thing, is that the system develops with time, with kind of putting these little boxes uh, around a series to say, okay, it's going to be within this by this space,
right.
and these are my media. Here's my color palette.
Mm,
Here's just this. Here's the subject matter.
mm,
Let's see. Or, for instance, sometimes I go in and with some friends, and they're making music all night, and I'm drawing, and then it's okay, here's the paper that I have. It's this size. Here's the one marker. Here's the one pen. Here's the one color. And then just allow the feeling to exist as the music goes. And I like that creating these little boxes and
mm,
allowing that interpretation to expand and flow, and
mm,
that creates these little systems, I find. And those
mm.
systems then, I think, create these little bodies, and the bodies create something more. And I think that's just fascinating to me, how the little tiny parts then create something greater as a whole.
Yeah, this like never ending unfolding, and then it's branching off, and you're observing which way you're deciding to go with the flow. And then I just think this is, for this is just like I don't want to say, but it's meditation. I know it is, right? I know it's just like this wild. It's philosophizing in time, it's just, it's like the little prince, isn't it? It's like, it's just this continual series of, just noticing, choosing, noticing, choosing, and then also noticing what you didn't choose. It's so titillating, isn't it? It's like, sometimes when I'm talking to people, these kind of real subtle things, they're sometimes described like, they're tingling, they're not quite there. And it's like this moment just before form decides itself, and how you've recognized that that isn't a singular event. I think that's amazing. So then, and then you take let's just talk about the art for a moment. So you'll take that and you'll have a phase that you're working on. So what would you say that's your interest at the moment? What phase are you in at the moment?
I think right now this kind of morning sketchbook, morning, afternoon, and kind of daily, really. I'd rather say daily, maybe.
Yeah.
Kind of giving it a space, giving it a separation, allowing it to grow as its own kind of moving entity and allowing that experimentation. Sometimes it's like, oh, I need to create this body of work for this thing. And then I'm like, okay, how do I bring that back? How do I bring it back and experiment and feel free again? And I think some of that for me sometimes changes with the seasons or different extremes of temperature or how I'm feeling about life
Mm,
that it's how do I create, it's the back and forth. How am I feeling? How am I interpreting?
mm,
And riding on the wave of observing that dream and being within the dream.
mm,
How do I allow it to take me on the roller coaster of life? And how do I, maybe steer it a little bit?
mm,
And that's the interesting balance is that being the artist isn't just the one moment it was created, but
mm,
this much larger journey. It,
mm,
for these last, I don't know, 6 years that I've come in and out of interviewing, doing these 200 some interviews and talking to all of these artists and creatives and cultural leaders, it's the ones that I see really grow that fascinates me. What keeps people fascinated? How do we find that fascination within ourselves to say, now's the next point? How to bring it back to a place that isn't just to create the next, this is the next thing, but to say, this is the next way I'm thinking. To
mm,
take the thought pattern and move the thought pattern along. That it's it's easy in some ways to say this is my single philosophy, but then to allow the philosophy to grow, allow the thought patterns to grow. I think that's the ever growing thing. It's that it's not necessarily the perfection, it's the continued pursuit of being experiencing within new circumstances, within the people as they change and shift, that we are also in in response to life, that the work should be in some can be not necessarily should be but
mm.
can be in response to our own lived experiences.
Yeah, that honesty to the mood of the moment has to come with an honesty that that mood, therefore, is going to change. Before your mind may what it's like, oh, how wow, I was feeling this, but now I'm actually feeling quite joyful. It's a real honest, authentic approach to admit to oneself that actually, I'm no longer struggling angst moment. I'm actually feeling quite joyful. And I agree. I do that as well in my practice. I'm a very kind of, but only similarly to you, over the last few years, it was like, hang on, how can we make this bigger? Is my, like you say, that lived interpretation. Do you embody like archetypes purposefully, or do you never do that? Do you feel like, do you ever do it the opposite way, where you feel like, right, this requires this, so I'm going to take on the embodiment of that for this particular project?
I feel like for me it grows is there's a certain way that I just have to be honest with my work,
Mm.
is that the work just has to have its own honesty, and it's almost impossible it's impossible to deny that. So there's an honesty, and then sometimes a dream, and I find that interesting. It's that there's places that we're in the past, we're in the future, we're in the present, and these elements are that it's okay to be in each of these parts of self. That it's
Mm.
okay to be reflecting upon what happened in the past. It's okay to say, oh, that's my interpretation of a great future, an apocalyptic future. This is my way to come back to the present, my way to see this dream, this beautiful dream, or something that I saw in my subconscious mind. That all of these are okay to see, and okay to envision the world, to look at the world as an observation, as an interpretation through the observation. Yeah, I in terms of the to choose an archetype, I find that's also the embodiment of a life that comes about. So maybe as like an act for a piece, but
Mm.
I'm not sure. I think that there's different elements to say, such as I can say for like a photo shoot, it's just this embodiment of our relation to each other necessarily. It's where we are, how to come back to being present, how to come back to being when there's someone else on the other side, come back to
Yeah.
being present with each other. And I find that also it's it's a conversation, that
Yeah.
creation is a conversation.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Do you feel that that's something that's been with you your entire life, or is this something that occurred to you later on? So is this a childhood connection that you've managed to keep hold of?
Hmm. To to say like this is the way that I've always seen the world. I think sometimes I look at the world in a new way. I think that's the I think
Like
that's
a
the
child, though. So, like every day is a new,
yeah, every day is a new day. Every day is a new chance to see the world in a new way. And I think if an audience can see that through the creative process, through the creative output, can see their life in a way where they're saying, "Oh wow, I could see the world in a new way." I
mm,
feel like that's a beautiful thing.
yeah,
To not say, "Oh, I'm going to tell you to see the world in this way or to see the
yeah,
world in that way,"
yeah,
but to be open to seeing the world in a new way, even for a moment, to step
yeah,
outside of ourselves and to say, "Wow, the world could be in a new way."
mm,
I think that's sometimes the most difficult thing as the human experience, to say, not just this is the way the world is, and
yeah,
and this is the system, that's the way the world works, but how to jump outside the self and to say there's different ways. I don't need to interact with the world from this perspective or that perspective,
mm,
but perhaps there are different ways to see the world, and that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Yeah, that it's a beautiful thing to see the world in a new way, at least for a moment, to refresh to a different perspective, even if we can't hold that perspective for longer than a moment. It's to say, oh, I've jumped out of this one perspective that I held myself to. This is the way. And so maybe that's for me is also like, oh, this is the way. This is the way that the world always is, and
Yeah,
then to
yeah,
jump
yeah,
out
yeah.
of that, you know?
Yeah, yeah, I really understand what you're saying. I describe it slightly different to myself in the sense that because I've moved around so much, or I'm in different um s- groups of people that are entirely different to each other, I realized that that was actually my interpretation of that was like, I am time traveling. I am jumping timelines here. It's like I'm in this new ecology and this is wild, and then looking at how everyone's moving there and interacting, and you're like, how they're responding to you, how you're responding to them. Do you, on that note, I'm just, when you're thinking about, also, are you thinking about what people are thinking about you? Those existential thoughts that we have. Oh, I'm walking down the street. You're walking down the street in Berlin, and then you remember all the times you've been in your apartment looking out of your window, sipping your coffee, and then you walk down the street and you think, are there people looking out of their window, drinking their coffee, looking at me? And I'm no longer the one in the window.
I think sometimes it becomes easier for me to think about that when I'm in that conversation
Mm,
with someone else. And that maybe through my art, through my poetry, uh through my lens, through just having a conversation, that the art is an extension of that conversation. And I think that's part of what makes it easier for me to see things in different perspectives, is that it is a conversation, that there's a that creativity as an extension of a conversation, that we're having a conversation, that it's an element of creative flow,
mhm,
and allowing and being excited by the creative flow. And that, and being able to see that in myself from a different perspective,
mhm,
I find is a beautiful thing.
mhm,
And it comes out easier when I'm in that conversation.
mhm. And what medium would you say comes the easiest to you? Which is the one that is home, so to speak, the most?
Uh, the
So,
most to be home, I've realized, is to sit and observe the world and have that conversation within.
mm,
That it's in fact recognizing that, and oh, there's a camera in my hand, and click, or
mm,
there's a pen in my hand, so I'm drawing it. But it's that the conversation is happening within the self,
mm,
and allowing myself to be present with that. That's the home. And I think that's why I like moving between the media, because I wanted to break that for myself. Break
yeah.
the I need this in order to feel home. I need this one external thing to have this conversation, that in fact it's
Mm,
not the external um image. It's
mm,
not the it's just being in that conversation. And sometimes the creation allows for the presence in the conversation, allows maybe me to see more deeply,
mm,
but that there's different ways to interpret the external world. There's different flows, there's different strokes, there's different ways to see and to be seen, to walk in the world.
mm,
And moving between elements of observation, I think is an interesting thing for me to interpret and reinterpret the world and find it interesting again
Mm,
and a reason to create, to wake up and say, yes, I'm going to interact with the world. I'm going to find some excitement again.
mm, mm. Like allowing the identity to be porous, like being the clay, not being the pot, that kind of formless movement, allowing things to move through you. Yeah, yeah. And I think that is that is somewhat unique, but again, it's happening more and more. But I do feel like, this more soluble way is I think it's so liberating. I'm sure you said freedom earlier. Something um very, I don't know, it feels emotional to me. It feels like home to have that, again. It's all just about how would you like this to be right now? How would you like this to be right? And also I really like the way that you're honoring the world, honoring what the world is saying to you in its many different ways that it's speaking. Um, I should imagine that Berlin is very cosmopolitan, so there are people all over the world there. Where were you before? Were you in New York or?
I was in directly before I was in France, and then before that I was traveling on the road, and before that I was in Pittsburgh.
So how's Berlin? What's Berlin giving you? What juice have you received from being there?
The last few years has been an interesting experience of Berlin. Uh, there's so many stories here. There's so many elements, and it's always a moving and shaping place. Berlin isn't necessarily one Berlin. It's many different villages.
Mm,
It's a city made up of villages, and that's an interesting place. Like it's it's just a little because there's no really center where everyone is. It's
right.
spread out, it's around, it's through, it's these little kietzes, it's this neighborhoods, neighborhoods within neighborhoods and the connection um of these little areas that each have their own importance, that it's not necessarily a central object, a
Mm,
central space and city. It's a moving, shaking, what's above ground, what's underground, and the
yeah.
intermix between them.
Mm. And I should imagine that, well, when one thinks of Berlin, you can always, it always feels like it's going to be full of characters. And I'm sure you've had plenty of interesting moments there. Um, how is it? What projects have you done there? Is there anything that you'd like to share that was something particularly interesting? Have you done music as well? Do you play? I seem to remember you playing guitar.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I've played guitar. I grew up playing instruments as a kid. For many years, I took lessons. More recently, I took a couple years of lessons with guitar, and then I took some voice lessons more recently, and that just inspired me in a new way. It just allowed me to see the voice in a new way, allowed me to hear things in a new way.
Mm,
And I think for me it's a playful thing that I'm surrounded by so many experts
yeah.
in as musicians, as jazz musicians, as different types of musicians, as so much of my photography and film work is with musicians.
Mm,
And for me, it's a way to hear. and to see differently, to interpret differently. For a long time, I worked with dancers, and I still do, and choreographers, and seeing time and space and movement differently through that, through being in the classrooms of dancers and to work with the choreographers and how they see the world and to find those interpretations through my lens, through my own interpretations, and the play and the dance between these interpretations of these amazing choreographers who I've worked with. And that's not only just creating the work, that's all of these conversations around it.
Yeah.
That's not just the thing itself, it's these life interpretations.
Yeah.
It's the way of seeing how we're moving, how we're acting and reacting. What are the improvisational elements? What are the storylines? How do we tell stories? That these moments with all of these interesting characters from these different groups in my life, that's what changes me. And I think for me those are the stories. That's all part of it. I photographed so many creatives through the years and filmed them, that interview this interview series that
Mm.
I've continued through parts of my time here in Berlin has really formed and shaped me, that it's allowing these conversations as you're having
Mm.
to go beyond the just, oh, I'm going to hold the space, but now I'm here to learn something. I'm here to grow as myself, and hopefully for my audience to also
Mm.
grow. That if I allow myself to be the first person in this experience, then also the audience will grow through that. And that's one of the interesting things in life that I find, is that the audience might learn through the work, through the embodiment of the work. That with all of the great choreographers and artistic directors and musicians and um, yeah, it's that it's their ways of seeing life that's so
Mm.
fascinating. And then that they put it into a form, that there's just a form. And for me, it's that the form is that sometimes the form can be so secondary that it's just like, yes, of course, it must have a form.
Mm.
Here's the form to the most fascinating conversations that I've had,
Mm.
because I've changed my life and therefore the work has changed. And so just putting the pen on the page, the or just clicking the image, what moment and how the moment is seen, how the moment is observed has changed, how my line has shifted because I've had these conversations,
Yeah.
because the line interacts with itself in a new way every time I've shifted. And I think that there's the I've shifted, here's how the line is, and now the line interacts with itself in a new way because I've grown. And I think that's when I look at so many artists and see their work through their lives,
Mm.
I've always been very inspired by seeing how their work has shifted over time. And that, I think, is the interesting part, is that we're not just static in one piece. And so you're asking me about something that I've enjoyed from the past few years here, showing some of my work of dancers and models from 2008 to 2025, and
Mm.
having that curated, by Timon, that was fascinating, is that it's, you know, to have a look back and seeing how I've seen the world through periods of my life. How do I
Mm,
see it now? How are the people shifted? How do I see the work now through this shift over time? And sometimes it's like looking at it from the bottom of the ocean, and sometimes one needs the bird's eye view. And I think that's the thing. Sometimes it's to drown, and sometimes it's to come up for air.
yeah, it must be. It's like reading an old letter that you've written or something, but then that's multiplied over, and it's that kind of distance now that you've got, and you're no longer. It's not the subject's gone, and it's this new, fresh objectivity. It must be amazing to just see that put out in front of you, just to kind of, like you were saying, wow, I was there, and then I was there, and then I was this, and then I was that. I mean, it's, I can just imagine that that's so, just so deeply enthralling. It's interesting that you keep saying it coming into form as well. I'm just thinking about, do you acknowledge, like, alongside the curiosity, the discipline, or would you even call it that? Because the people that you've spoken to, especially the choreographers or the dancers, there's a lot of hard work and discipline and tears that go into that kind of embodiment, as there is with all any kind of, mastery of anything. It's hours upon hours that people don't see when the doubts are. And what have you learned about connecting with that side of things, that friction, to, because you've mentioned flow, but sometimes that germination, that friction for something to be born requires that extra push that can appear painful, even though it's part of the beauty. It's still this surge of something wanting to be realized that is like a big final birthing.
I think that there's something in here with the discipline, that to remember that it's a marathon and not a sprint.
Yeah.
That sometimes it's that the piece of work is a letter to my future self almost. That I
Mm.
pull out an idea from the past and I bring it back into the present, and I say, wow, that was a brilliant way to see the world. Let me reincorporate that element into my life. I've discovered that before, and now it's an element for me to utilize in the future. And that it's that long term view of continuing to create,
Mm.
continuing to make something in the world, continuing to find the way forward, that it's not just this box, the singular box, that it's in fact the accumulation of many boxes. And that's also in the forgiveness of self,
Mm.
that I feel is so important. That there's screw ups along the way. There's going down a different road, but to say, yes, that's
Mm.
that road, and now here's the way that that's going to move forward. Because sometimes that's the most brilliant thing, is that different note that I didn't know that it could be that way, and to say, yeah, like that's going to be the way forward, and to embrace that. And part of that that's part of the marathon, is to say, I'm going to create in a new day. I'm going to create in a new way for myself, for, for whatever that is that's driving me at the moment.
Mhm.
And I think that's something that I've seen from the great creatives who've continued on for not just a little section of their life, but have
Yeah.
continued on for their whole life, that there's many different hurdles within larger just living, that it's not just okay, I now create this thing. There can so easily be this anxiety uh, to create the one thing that is going to be it, that I think is often within, especially younger creators, that it's to say, oh, this is the one thing, but to allow that forgiveness and to move through, to bounce back, resilience,
Mhm.
to go through the traumas of life and to
Yeah.
say, okay, now I'm going to create something from that or through it, or learn some new skill or some new element to interpret, to learn a new way to get through this mentally, emotionally, spiritually tough time.
Mm.
And that's going to influence what I create.
Yeah.
I've seen so many, unfortunately, I've known so many great creatives and watched some pass away who I've photographed, who I've filmed, who I've worked with deeply, and to see them through their lives and to say, wow, looking back after 3, 5, 10 years or
Mm.
more, say, wow, like what they said there influenced and changed my life,
Yeah.
that it was that the work itself was just one element. It was that reminder of who they were as a person for myself. It wasn't the it, what stuck with me wasn't necessarily just the piece of music or the choreography which they made. It was their life experience and how it was interpreted through their media, that it
Yeah.
was something that they lived by, and then that was inexplicably part of their life's work. And that for me is what it's about, is that to live the life and to be and to have that say, this is my work now. And even if I say, I've seen, over so many years of working with creatives and seeing how they're like great, great creatives, and to see how their life philosophy changes over time and how certain elements stay the same, and to see how that translates
Mm.
into into the writing of their music, into the performing of it, to see the backstage, to see the how it transforms into the different ways that they interact with the world.
Mm.
That's beautiful. And at
Yeah.
the end of the day, it's live a beautiful life and maybe be inspired by someone else's way that they see life is beautiful, even for a moment. Even even if they didn't always see life as beautiful,
Yeah.
or everyone has their tough times, when they're honest with the people around them, to say, wow, like even through that tough time, they got through somehow, some way, and there was that beautiful nugget,
Mm.
and something they created was honest to this and that and their own lived experience. And so that for me is beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. That for me is beautiful. And I just think you've explained why. art and poetry and the aliveness of those is so part of the symphony of life, because without those notes, how could we look back at the tragedies that seemingly so to say, oh, there was real beauty in that, is where that, that musical, where the full symphony comes to an end and can look back on itself and go, and there we have it. It's so, um, so should be, sung to children, to remember this, remember this, because these whispers on the wind of the future and the past calling you is what will get you through these conversations with older people who can say that in that way, and these artists that can say that in that way. Um, and I think what you've reminded me of as well is that, like, I don't know why I'm talking about children at the moment, but, you know, we sometimes feel that we need to over explain and educate when actually the meaning, as you've been saying throughout this entire conversation, reinterprets itself. Peter and the Wolf means one thing when you're 5, means something else when you're 10, and then you listen to it again, you're 40, and you're like, wow, this is really quite deep. You know what it's the same thing, isn't it? And as you were saying about when you paint something, whoever your artist would be, and they're looking back. Yeah, I don't really know if I have any other questions, because I think you just hit the nail on the head there, Aaron. I really do. So yeah, so thanks so much for talking to me. And yeah, let's talk again sometime, and you can bring your guitar and I can sing.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I really appreciated it too. Have fun in Berlin.
Come visit sometime.
I will do, I will do. See you soon.
See you.